morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Legislative Breakfast 2025. Thank you so much to our legislators for coming. I believe we have one more person who will show up, but let's get started. He's heard this intro statement many times, so he won't miss it. The League of Women Voters welcomes you. We're a nonpartisan political organization of all genders. We consider issues that impact our members and take positions on them. We often take action to bring them about, but we do not choose parties, we do not support specific candidates. Thus, we are nonpartisan and political. Today's forum is focused on state legislative issues, things that are governed by Connecticut laws. Of course, there's interaction between the local and the state, and the local and the federal and state, but primarily it's a focus on our legislative work. After a brief introduction of our speakers, I'll raise a few questions for discussion, and as the morning goes, I'll call on you for your questions. We should wrap up no later than 12, certainly, possibly before then. We'll see how it goes. 2 hours is long. When you have questions, please, not speeches. Just get your question, ask it, and let them do the speaking primarily today. We want to have as much time as possible to hear from our legislators. If a question does seem to go on too long, I may just jump in the interest of time. This isn't a timed forum. This isn't a debate. It's an informational forum, nor does everyone have to answer every question. Sometimes just saying, I agree with so-and-so is plenty, if you feel like you really want to go on record about something. Usually what happens at these forums is that the people who are most knowledgeable talk about the issues, and we really learn a lot from them. I hope they learn a lot from all of us too, because they are listening to our questions, and usually the top issues tend to be obvious. They surface, they rise by the end of the morning. Before I start, I want to thank you guys for coming, all of you. I know how busy it gets from the moment the gavel opens. You don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't see your families. So thank you for coming to see us. I want to let you know that we invited the people from New Britain and Plainville. The area, of course, is New Britain and Newington. That pretty much reflects New Britain Area League of Women Voters membership. We also invited Senator Henry Martin from Plainville, who sent his regrets and said he was very sorry he couldn't make it. He had a previous engagement on the date. Lastly, thanks to the New Britain Library for providing this space to us, sound system, and all of their gracious hosting for free. I'm glad to see some more people coming in. There's still chairs available, and if need be, somebody will go get some more. Good, I think we're about ready to get started. It's 10 after 10, that looks just right. So why don't we just go down the road in terms of introduce yourself by name, of course, and where you represent, and what committees are you on, please?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Rick Lopes, I'm the state senator of the 6th District. The 6th District is all of New Britain, all of Berlin, and a little bit of Farmington. I'm the chairperson of the Environment Committee this year, vice chair of the Transportation Committee, and I'm on about 4 or 5 other committees. Close enough. Thank you. This is my 5th year in the Senate.
Hi, Representative Bobby Sanchez, 25th District. I'm on the Finance and Bonding Committee. I am also on the Education Committee. I've been on the Education Committee since I've been at the Capitol since 2011. And I'm also on the Housing Committee, and I'm a Deputy Speaker.
Hi, everybody. Manny Sanchez, I represent the 24th District. I have been a state representative for the last 5 years. I am the chair of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and I also sit on the Education Committee.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave DeFranzo. I represent the 26th District, which is basically from Allen Street over to the Brady Farms area. It's my first year in the legislature, so I'm learning a lot. And I'm on the Appropriations Committee, Education Committee, and the Higher Ed Committee.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see such a nice crowd this early in the morning. This is one of the most fun parts of the job, I think, for me, is actually be able just to spend time with people talking about policy and maybe some politics, right? My name is Gary Turco, state rep from the 27th District. Just started serving in my 4th term. And I live and represent Newington and the most eastern part of the city of New Britain. If you know John Downey Drive, Alvarium Brewery, that area of the city. Almost Paradise Pizza. It's actually Manny Sanchez's district, but that's the only place for pizza that's close enough to my district. So I'm in that area, that's where you'll find me as well. And I only started representing New Britain in 2022, so it's been a short amount of time, but I've come already to get to know so many of people in the community, nonprofits, individuals, and just working with this incredible delegation of folks. We're like a family. We're constantly, informing each other about what's going on and helping each other out and doing the best we can for the city. I'm serving as the Vice Chair of the General Law Committee this session. I'm on the Transportation Committee, and I'm on, what's the third committee that I'm serving on?
Higher Ed.
Not Higher Ed anymore. General Law, Housing. How can I forget Housing? Brand new committee for me. I requested to be on the Housing Committee because we have a housing crisis, right? So I'm on the Housing Committee for the first time. I'm sure we'll get more of the housing issues later. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm a brand new legislator. I serve Plainville, a sliver of Farmington, and a portion of Southington. I'm serving on Public Health, Committee on Children's, Appropriations, and General Law, focusing on the subcommittees for Appropriations and Human Services and Public Health. And Plainville and New Britain have always been great neighbors, so I just want to thank you guys for having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me lead off with a question from the State League of Women Voters, which they asked us to speak about, which has to do with early voting and funding more for early voting. They say that we just concluded a successful cycle of early voting. However, the funding promised to the Secretary of State's office by the legislature to support early voting didn't materialize. This made voter education and the extensive training of local officials challenging. Towns and cities were not adequately funded. The League of Women Voters supports the Secretary of State's request for funding to rectify the situation. Would you support providing funds for the Secretary of State's office this fiscal year? Increasing funds, obviously. There are funds provided all the time, so that they can fund voter education and adequately support the towns and cities. And do we have someone who wants to chime in on that particularly to begin with? Rick, you look like you're grabbing a mic. Right. There's a little delay on that. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. The light shuts off. That's an easy one. Obviously, with early voting, we expected our registrars to do a lot more work this year, and they did across the state. And voting is one of the fundamental parts of a democracy. So demanding that they do an awful lot more work naturally implies that we should give them more funding to be able to do that work adequately, safely, and securely. So I think it's a no-brainer. I don't think it's even much of a partisan issue that we have to increase funding to ensure that we have safe, secure elections. We always have in Connecticut. There really has never been an issue, barring some issues with the city down south in Connecticut we don't need to mention. Other than that, voting issues in Connecticut have been very small, very limited, and overall people do a great job. Here in New Britain, generally fantastic job with all our registrars over the years, no major issues, and we do need to fund them. New Britain was one of the clerk just sent us the email. They were one of the 9, I believe, pilot programs for the tabulators this year, and that's going to expand to the rest of the state. So they have a report on that and how the rest of the state needs to encompass that when they do voting next round. So these are things we all have to take into consideration. And yes, it's going to take money. It's not a lot of money, so we need to fund them adequately, and we need to go forward with good elections.
Okay, we have a number of people who are on appropriations where this might come in. Any of you want to chime in on that? Please? Good.
Sure, I agree with everything that Rick said about the funding for the early voting process. And I think what we saw in New Britain here is that people certainly took advantage of the early voting process. We had a great turnout in terms of the early voting. And the other piece of this is it does require the registrars to do additional work, but it hopefully alleviates some of our confusion and issues on election day, because you have a number of people that vote early. That reduces some of the same day registrations and things like that. So hopefully, as we continue with this process, you know, the first time you do something, you're going to learn from your mistakes. We have to provide the adequate funding, but also in terms of the organizational and structural pieces of it, the registers have now done it once, and hopefully we can correct some of the issues that we had the first time around.
Gary, go ahead.
I just want to quickly add and completely agree with both of my colleagues and any more additional funding. It never made sense to me that Connecticut was so limited, one of the most limited states in the country, that you had just this, you know, one 14-hour day that you could vote, and if you wanted to vote by mail, you had to have a special excuse. So not only with the things are going to be a little in flux, I think, for the next few years on how this all shapes up and the funding, and we're going to have to adjust as we go, and I'm sure the league is going to stay on top of a lot of this, because now that we have the constitutional amendment that passed for no excuse absentee ballots can start once the legislature approves that in statute this year, which we're trying to work on. Does everybody know that was on the ballot last year? And so it passed. Thank you to all the voters. Overwhelmingly, it's a constitutional change that people will be able to vote by mail without needing an excuse. So what we're going to need to look at now is, and it's going to take a few years till it all works out, how many people are actually voting for mail. There are some states, once they've changed to no excuse, absentee balloting, it's overwhelmingly 80% of people are voting by mail. People don't even want to go to the polls anymore. It's so easy and convenient for them. So what that all will look like will determine going forward too, what funding needs to go to early voting, what funding needs to go to counting those ballots, what funding needs to go to operate the polling places, and we'll be able to hopefully work out a nice system, but it probably will take a little time. Anyone add?
I agree with my colleagues. I would just say that I really think a major source of the funding does need to go to education. I am extremely happy with no excuse absentee, but I do think there's a lot of confusion on filling out the first application and getting the second ballot and filling that in and returning it, and I found that a lot at the doors. So whichever way we lean more towards, I just think a lot of education really needs to be put out there in a timely manner, and I'm just hoping to see the funding come through there.
Okay, thank you. Mandy and Bobby, you're the only two who didn't chime in on this. Would you like to
Absolutely agree. More funding.
Mandy?
Short and sweet.
More funding.
Good, that's what I was kind of hoping would be the length of response. Okay, can we just hold on for a minute and look at friends, people in the audience. The other question that the State League is very interested in is the Environmental Rights Amendment. Last year, the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment was proposed, which would establish the right of all Connecticut citizens to a healthy environment. This amendment will be proposed again this year. Would you support this amendment to the Constitution to start moving Connecticut forward in fighting climate change? If not, why not? Anyone want to speak on this?
Ironically, not so much an environment issue, believe it or not. It's comes up in other committees. It is in our committee, but it is in other committees as well. It is a controversial issue in some ways and not controversial in others. It just ensures that people will have the right to live in an environment that's clean and safe. It seems like a common sense kind of thing. The people opposed to it, and it is a partisan issue, the people opposed to it are afraid that it'll create legal issues, where people will now begin to sue, saying that, hey, the environment's not clean enough, I'm gonna bring it to the courts to start suing, and it can become a legal mess. I honestly don't know where this bill is gonna go, if it has legs, and if it passes, don't expect any massive changes in how our lives live and how our environment is treated. It really doesn't have teeth to do anything. It is just kind of an aspirational statement of like, everyone should live in a clean environment. And I think most of us agree with that. So we'll see how it progresses.
Thank you. Anybody else have any opinions on this bill?
I'm in agreement. I mean, we have to do a lot more when it comes to our environment. And I particularly have been arguing quite a bit about our school environments. You know, how our schools don't have the adequate HVAC systems to keep our kids, the air clean in the classroom, to get children to have AC and heating systems that work appropriately. That's always been an issue, and I was really stunned with a report that came out from local boards of education that there's over 70% of the schools in the whole state of Connecticut that don't have adequate, HVAC systems. So we really have to look at that. So that's my beef on that portion. The other thing, my concern also is I really don't believe in mandates when it comes to electric vehicles. I think that many people want to see electric vehicles get a little better because they don't charge quickly. You can't go with extensive miles with these vehicles, and there's concerns about the batteries, with how they dispose of them. So I'm hoping that eventually science will get better when it comes to electric vehicles, but I don't believe we should mandate people that, you have a certain amount of years before we turn all over to electric vehicles. Right now, we just can't do that, and they're extremely expensive. I tried to buy one, it was almost $70,000 to buy that vehicle. I said, I can't afford that. So, although I believe we need to do more, but I can't afford that. But that's my view.
Bought one for $1,500.
I was just about to say, Rick.
You can only go 10 miles with it.
Thanks. We talk about this issue quite honestly a lot, and specifically how it affects our cities. Some of the highest rates of asthma, some of the highest emission rates because of the close connection to highways. And so our hope is that, to Rick's point, that it's just not something that we say we're going to do and essentially have no teeth to essentially address the issue. So while I think it is important that we give it a stamp of approval, but I hope that there are wraparound services and resources to essentially connect our folks to in places like Newbury.
Thank you. Just really quick, as Rick said and Bobby and Manny said, I think all of us here would support that concept as an ideal. My issue is we have a lot of real challenges that we want to take on, and we have a finite amount of time to do it. We have a lot of local issues here that are super important to people, and so to get into a huge back and forth and argument with folks about an amendment that doesn't really have any teeth behind it. I support the concept, but I'd rather be pushing for things that have an impact for folks here in Newbury. And that's I think is something that we all are trying to keep our eye on.
I think my colleagues said it really well, and I don't want to be repetitious on this.
I agree, and I know that I've been fighting for in my district just stronger regulations for an existing issue, and I think we have to look at just some of the existing issues. Right now I've been fighting for a company that's going for a permit to burn medical waste. So I think there are some local issues that have some things that we should be working on.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me ask one more, and then maybe we'll open up to all of the people out here too. This involves the Trust Act, the act which separates Connecticut's law enforcement people from working with ICE, except under the few circumstances where it makes sense to do so. Do you believe that the act should remain as it stands? Should it be weakened? Should it be strengthened?
Yeah, so I think the Attorney General's just put out some guidance on what local agencies and local law enforcement groups should do. I think that we need to continue to listen to what the law enforcement's talking about, but we need to make sure that folks in the community, our local agencies, understand their rights. They know what ICE is entitled to do and what they're not entitled to do. We need to make sure that our local nonprofit agencies are in touch with the Attorney General's office. Our Attorney General has taken a leading role in making sure that the rights of local people here in Connecticut are not going to be trampled on. And I think we need to make sure that people know the resources that they have to understand what they are entitled to. The other piece of this is kind of a developing situation. If there's a need to strengthen the law, then I think we need to look into that. And we'll have to kind of see with a lot of this stuff how it starts to play out. But you know, I'm certainly not an expert on these kind of legal issues, so you know, I'll be leaning on the Attorney General's office and some of the attorneys that we have in state government to get their expertise on what exactly we need to do to make sure that people have the safety and the rights that they're entitled to.
I just want to add that in regards to ICE and immigration, what's going on in this country is really sad. I understand if there's criminals out there, they need to be deported. If they have real, crimes that they've committed here in this country, I'm all for that. They shouldn't be in this country. I get that. Well, what I'm hearing, I'm a director of a homeless shelter in Meriden. And this past summer, I had an influx of Venezuelan immigrant families come into the shelter. They all have gotten housed through advocacy groups, but these were not criminals. These were mothers and children. I'm talking about babies. I'm talking about children under the age of 15 that were coming into the shelter. And if you sat with them like I did to hear their horrifying story on how they had to make it through from Venezuela all the way to the border, I mean, literally, I cried with them. It's sad. These are stories that you're not going to hear because you don't hear many of these. You don't hear the media talk about this. But a lot of these children and these mothers have gone through some serious issues while they were trying to get to this country. And all they're looking for is a better life for their children and to look for work. They don't want to get into our Department of Social Services to get food stamps or anything like that. They want to work and they want to provide for their kids. So it's a serious issue. I mean, and it's an ongoing one. But what I'm concerned the most is what's going on in social media where they're now telling people that were born on the island of Puerto Rico that they need to be carrying, their passports and their licenses. I think people need to be educated. Puerto Ricans born on the island are U.S. citizens. And I said, oh, well, social media sometimes has a lot of crazy stuff that it's not true. We all know that. But I had someone verify to me that her son, who is Puerto Rican and works in the arts in New York, the other day, ICE went to his house, nearly broke down his door. He said, I'm not letting you in. If you have a warrant, please put that warrant under the door so I can read it. They refused to do that. They told him, if we come back here, we're going to come blazing. So he, of course, as soon as they left, he took off to talk to an advocacy group because now he's afraid to go back to his apartment because when they said blazing, does that mean they're going to shoot my door down and come get me? I don't know. And he's Puerto Rican, and he was born in Brooklyn. So these things are happening. They may not be happening a lot, but they are happening. So it's a serious issue, and we really have to keep an eye on what's going on in this country.
Thank you. Gary, are you looking for a microphone?
I'll say a quick comment after
Yeah,
this.
he can make- So, I promised Bill I wouldn't do this, but I guess we have to roll into a little bit of the national issues. We would be naive to think that watching refugees, immigrants, even the legal ones having their rights violated doesn't mean that we as regular citizens aren't gonna have our rights violated next. And we're already seeing it. I mean, they're ripping through our private information in the Treasury and various aspects of federal government without legislative approval, just with approval from the White House and executive orders. And everyone knows it's an erosion. So they're gonna start with one group, and it's gonna keep going and keep going to the point that all of us are gonna see our rights eroded and taken away. And it's gonna be a miserable 4 years of fighting that. But that's what we have to do. That's our responsibility as citizens. And just because it's miserable and it's in our lifetime doesn't mean we can shirk from that duty. So let's just be prepared. Thank you.
Perhaps we can bring this back to the question of, do you want to keep it as it is, strengthen it, or weaken it? I think that the commentary that we've heard has been enlightening, though. Thank you.
Yeah, to follow what the senator stated, as far as making sure we're protecting everyone's rights, and Representative, Bobby Sanchez telling that heartbreaking story of what's happening with the Trust Act and with many other laws that we have on the books to protect people's reproductive rights, to protect LGBTQ plus rights. So many rights of people in our community that we care about that are going to be taken advantage of potentially by this current administration. We have to be proactive on preparing, and this is already happening. Our Attorney General I've spoke to, our Governor's office, and in the legislature. We are already proactively looking at laws on how we can strengthen the Trust Act and strengthen other laws we have in the books to protect from possible, infringements on people's rights and liberties from the federal government. We have, a federalist system where sometimes the federal government will supersede our state rights. We have a most conservative Supreme Court in history that may make some rulings that will, just have a higher authority than any state laws that we have here, right? But we have to try, and I'm ready to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, please.
So I would say strengthen it at the minimum to be able to provide more education. What I'm seeing in my district is we do not have as high a rate of diversity, but we have children that are scared. We have my son, who honestly, I didn't have this conversation, and apparently I should have. Came home asking if him and his father and his abuela should be carrying their birth certificates. And kids are scared, and when you don't have the conversations with them, they fill in the narrative themselves. So I think we need a lot of education out there on what the actual rights are. I know I'm meeting with my town manager and superintendent to see any ways that I can be helpful in my community and to be able to get the education out there. But I think there's a lack of that in explaining exactly what the Trust Act is, what the rules are for schools. And, my son's telling me that he has friends that are not coming to school right now. So we want our kids in school. We want to make sure that they're safe and they're okay, and nobody should be too afraid to get an education.
Thank you. All right, let me open up to the audience, because I know that there are questions out there too, though I have plenty of others. Go ahead, Pat.
Hi, I'm Pat McCurdy-Quesimano. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, but I just want to piggyback onto what you're saying. There is a program here in the library this coming Thursday evening that's co-sponsored by the library and literacy volunteers, and it's about immigrants' rights. And it's an immigration attorney who's going to be here speaking. It's from 5 to 7 on Thursday night. So I just encourage everyone to consider coming or share that information with anyone that you know that is concerned about this issue, which honestly should be all of us. But I just wanted to point that out. So you can ask upstairs at the library if
just in addition to that, they need to register.
you need to register. Yeah. So you can do that upstairs, probably at the reference desk, I'm guessing. You can register for the program.
Thank you. Is there a question for our legislators?
Not me at this time.
Okay, sure. You
In regards to early voting, my concern is that everyone needs the right to vote. And how do you plan to focus assistance to the seniors that are homebound, that they are the ones that really planted the love in our country, and right now we should never forget about them. So I do support early voting, and thank you for doing that. But I want to know what's your plan for seniors, because obviously they're gonna need help and they should never be neglected.
Someone want to speak? Go ahead.
So that's a great question. I work as a visiting nurse, so a lot of my patients are the senior population. So I do think no excuse absentee voting will help with that. But I also have a lot of senior citizens that, unless they are strictly homebound, really want to get out to the communities. So in any way that we can work with transportation services, senior services, to be able to make sure that they can come out and vote, I think would be extremely, extremely beneficial.
Thank you. Anyone else want to be in on that? Gary?
Yeah, I'll just say with the early voting, what's really nice about it is rather than on election day where it could be crowded, there's parking trouble, there's lines, early voting, depending on which election it is, you might have 10, 14 days before where there's an ample opportunity for someone to be able to pick that individual up, bring in there. I know the Democratic Town Committee, I'm sure the Republican Town Committee here in the city offer free rides to anybody. Bobby Sanchez will come pick you up and take you to the poll in the election this year, I'm pretty sure. So, to be able to vote. And then, as Representative Martinez said, the no excuse absentee should help for anybody that can't get a ride or just wants to do it from the comfort of their home.
I do have a second question regarding the same topic.
Okay, go ahead, Yvette.
What are the warranties that on the online and early voting that we have to safeguard the integrity of the voting? My question goes, we are aware of cyber crimes, and I'm not surprised with everything that I hear now in the news and how many laws are broken, that higher powers will intend to dilute that vote and I don't know, change it. How confident you feel that the state of Connecticut have that cyber security for our voting system online?
Yeah, I don't believe there's actually any online component to the early voting process. From my experience and what I saw is when people go to vote early, their ballot is put in a sealed envelope, which is then held there until election day, and then it's opened after election day. So I don't believe there's an online component to the early voting. So there may be in the future, and that would certainly open it up to the issues of cybersecurity and things like that. But right now, I feel pretty confident in the security of our election systems, at least here in New Britain and for the most part in Connecticut. Obviously, you always need to have oversight, and you always need to make changes when you need to, but so far I've been pretty satisfied with the security levels in terms of the early voting process.
Thank you, Dave. I think that's pretty accurate, that our machines are not connected to the internet, and therefore they cannot be hacked over the internet.
Right, and the fact what David brought up, there's a paper trail.
Right.
So, I would be concerned if it was just a computer where you registered your vote, then I would probably say, oh, wait a minute, But here you're actually filling out a ballot, so you're recording your vote and you're putting it into a machine.
It's a process.
And there's a process, So if something's not right, if a machine was to malfunction, then the register of voters would have to go to the paper ballots to make sure they count that appropriately. So I'm really confident with what we have here in Connecticut and in the city of New Britain. I'm not concerned now, but you're absolutely right. There are probably other states out there that are doing other ways of voting, and it's concerning.
Thank you. Let's change into a new topic, because I think this one was fairly clear. Peggy?
Yeah, hi. I'm a big healthcare
we met at the Capitol with Senator Blumenthal about healthcare advantage, healthcare plan, medical advantage plan, which is a travesty. It is pathetic. I wish I could just, if any of you all are involved in Medicare Advantage plan, I would like to wipe your slate clean. There is a position going on in the country where all physicians are getting together and we're going to wipe it out because it's just a travesty what's going on with that company. It's all about profit, 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 and no money. With that in mind, I want to read something to you. With the federal government likely withdrawing support from preventive health care, including immunizations, will Connecticut pick up the balance both in education for the need and in support of the cost, number one. And number two is there's a lot of push for flexing the fiscal guardrails and raising the state spending cap. I just want to know what your thoughts are on all that.
Two-parter. The governor in his address did make it pretty clear that he was willing to step up, and legislature will follow, that should the federal government not follow through on some of its promises in the past, that the state will step up to that plate to the best of our abilities to make sure that these things happen. And in terms of fiscal guardrails, to continue his address, he also did show some flexibility on adjusting the guardrails. And that will be an ongoing discussion over the next 2-3 months.
And in regards to his budget, like every budget that the governor puts out, we, the legislature, we take a thorough look at his budget. We may agree on some of the things that he has in his budget, and we may disagree on others. And so we'll adjust them, and I'm glad we had part of the delegation here that's on Appropriations Committee, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna fight all tooth and nail for the things that we need in our cities.
And I want to say something specifically about our chair of appropriations. She emailed our group and said, the governor's budget is not law. So it is our responsibility, it is incumbent on us to look at that budget thoroughly. We had a caucus the other day where she asked us to look at our Office of, what does OFA stand for again? Fiscal Analysis, the summary of their budget, and go line by line. And she has an open door policy where we can address the issues that we're most passionate about, but more importantly, really are responsible for figuring it out collectively. So while the governor did present his budget, we will be doing our part.
Thank you. Just quickly, and just to kind of echo what the other folks said, I think Connecticut is actually in a little bit of a better position than other states because of some of the hard votes that these folks have taken over the last number of years to get that surplus in place and have the rainy day fund there, because we don't know what's going to happen in Washington. You know, we're supposed to have our budget done April, May, and the federal government may come back in August and say, we're not going to fund this, we're not going to fund that. So we have a surplus of money that we can use to kind of fill those gaps if we need to. And so it's kind of a wait and see approach right now, but as Rick said, the governor did open the door to adjusting the fiscal guardrails, which I think is a good thing, and will probably be needed going forward.
A federal issue, but completely agree with you on those advantage plans. I mean, this is what happens when, you know, government outsources, allows privatization of a federal program that works really well to, you know, maybe be more efficient and save money, and it ends up screwing the consumer, right? So, great example of that. Be very careful when those offers get made, right? And government wants to do that. Yeah, I think my colleague said it well. I mean, Connecticut, we're in a good position, having saved, you know, 18% of our, you know, annual budget in our reserves. I think it's like $6 billion plus, which is great. And we do have, you know, a surplus coming in. We do have some deal on potentially amending the fiscal guardrails. But I just want to be honest with everybody. That would only go so far if some of the potential cuts that Project 2025 and the Trump administration have hinted at potentially doing. I think our Speaker of the House told us in caucus if they cut Medicaid by 10%, it'd be like a $2 billion that we'd have to make up. We'll get by a couple years, but then we're in big trouble. all right? And we either have to cut a lot of other programs or services to cover that, or drastically raise taxes, and those two things are not good ideas either. You know, there's some wait and see. We'll do the best we can with the current elected officials you have, we promise you that, but there may be a limit to what we can do, to be honest.
So we've talked about vaccinations on public health, as well as appropriations is dealing with that. As a nurse, I purposely went for public health, and then I asked for human services as my subcommittee, strictly for Medicaid reimbursements. We have parts of Medicaid that haven't had a raise since 1998, and a large, vast majority since 2007, which really impacts patients' care. So that is something that I will definitely be fighting hard for.
Great.
Thank you.
Talk more about that. Can she give us a few more details on that, on the reimbursement question?
I'm gonna pass it back to Rebecca in a second. And the Medicaid reimbursement issue is something that really impacts poor families, working families, because it makes it less likely for doctors to care for those type of patients. So those are something that we really need to, we're looking at this session, and I think we really need to do something about it.
Are the details ready to be able to talk about some of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
So some of the areas in particular that I've been focused on is looking at home care nursing. People want to be able to age in place in their homes. It's financially in their best interest as well to be able to do so. But currently, right now, when we're looking at Massachusetts rate is more than double what Connecticut rate is. I'm also looking, especially at behavioral health. One of my coworkers was one of the nurses that was murdered this past year while caring for a patient in their home. So the legislator did a great job of making sure that we have some safety protections, such as being able to take resources such as escorts into homes of patients that have a history of sexual assault, attempted murder, domestic violence. A lot of my patients come straight from liquidating forensics, CVH. But in order, if they're paying $53 to an agency per visit and the nurse gets paid $40, the escort, they're already working at a negative capacity. So obviously many companies are not going to take that on, which puts healthcare workers at risk, it puts patient workers at risk. So just an example of a couple areas, but it's been everything from surgeons, orthopedics that see Medicaid patients, they're seeing one per year pro bono, and they said it's to be nice, because what they get paid doesn't even cover the hardware that it takes for the knee replacement, let alone any of the time of any of the providers. So Medicaid is a serious issue, and it's been seriously troubling to see exactly where the rates are. So that's a couple of examples.
Thank you. Last year, there was a great deal of legislation brought into the legislature, that was not well said, in the interest of affordable housing. It takes all shapes and forms. Different people have different ideas as to what affordable means. What do you see going forward this year to help people, especially the New Britain population, with affordable housing?
Great question.
Great question. So I did jump on and co-introduce one of the Just Cause acts. I know that I'm seeing a lot of issues with Just Cause in my district. Plainville is different in that it has the highest population in 9 square miles. So you think city for for people living so close together, but it's actually Plainville, Connecticut's #1 for having the most amount of people per square mile. So in Plainville, we have a different problem than New Britain. In Plainville, we build on every blade of grass. Every time I think there's no way there could be another development because there is no space, there is somehow space. But we have been building the wrong types of properties. We've been building houses that go for $600,000 to $700,000. So we've been building the wrong type. So I think that we need to look at what we're building, make sure that there's programs in place to build the right type of affordable housing, and looking at acts such as Just Cause, so that especially these landlords that are out of state, that are just jacking up prices when people aren't doing anything wrong, or they're jacking it up just because they went to their fair rent commission, which in my town, we're not lucky enough to have one. We have under 25,000 people, so we don't have a fair rent commission. But, you know, people are going to, going to the fair rent commissions, and then they're seeing negative recourses for that, so.
Try to be fairly concise here, but I have a lot to say about this issue because it was the #1 issue for me this legislative session. It's my top priority. Like I mentioned, I asked to be on the Housing Committee, which I'm serving on, along with Representative Bobby Sanchez. I think, Senator Lopes, are you on Housing too?
No, sir.
You used to be the chair, right? So, but I'm also honored, besides being on the committee, the speaker asked if I could be one of the legislators, there's 3 of us, leading one of our top caucus priority bills, 5002, which is a bill to increase affordable housing throughout the state and reduce, hopefully eliminate in time, our homelessness crisis, which is rising. So I've been in hours and hours of meetings, meeting with every advocacy group throughout the state. Friendship Center, Caitlin Rose and her team were one of those here in New Britain. Yesterday had a long meeting with the majority leader of the House, Jason Rojas, on what we're gonna put in this bill. We're starting with, everything we can think of, and then we'll have to narrow down from there based on what we could afford and what we can politically pass, because you gotta get 76 votes, and these issues are usually highly controversial. Different communities, different reps want different things as far as housing, so you have to find a lot of compromise here. But we are looking for a multifaceted approach, as Representative Martinez mentioned. Tenant protections is certainly one of them, right? Trying to prevent people from being evicted, being homeless in the first place, helping people get by, making sure we don't have any landlords doing something unscrupulous, but also being fair to those landlords that are being responsible, that are purchasing properties that are going to rent them at a fair price, right? So there's a really good balance that we have to try to strike there in protecting tenants, incentivizing both landlords and developers, right? We need a lot more development of housing. Right now, the demand is super high, and our supply is, a lot older, and we don't have enough. It's estimated we need about 100,000 units, whether it's a home or an apartment. 100,000 more affordable units to take care of our current crisis. Start to bring that demand down and have more affordable prices. That is going to take not only protecting the current units that we have and making sure they stay affordable and those tenants don't get kicked out and then the rents go from $800 a month to $3,000, which we're seeing, right? But that we build a lot more, and we're trying to find that balance between the carrot and the stick, right? I'm going to pick on Simsbury. I don't have any idea if there's problems in Simsbury. I'm just calling a name out, right? Let's say it's very difficult politically to force Simsbury to go ahead and build 1,000 more units of affordable housing, right? Very difficult. So what we are trying to do is figure out how we can make that happen, but without forcing. We provide an incentive that makes Simsbury say, yeah, this is great. We want to have more housing in our community. We want to have more, housing for, working people, lower income people. And these incentives that you're providing us to help with, if there's an increase in education costs, public safety costs, wastewater, sewer, infrastructure, sounds like a good deal to us, and make that handshake. So it's really going to be a multifaceted approach on what we can push, what we can incentivize, how we can protect, and how we can grow. I hope that provides some sort of overview of what we're looking to do in that House Democrats' priority bill.
Thank you. I'm not going to add much more. That Gary talked about it very well, and he's much more knowledgeable about it than I am. I just think, as Gary said, as the state provides incentives for developers to build housing units, we need to make sure that we are setting requirements for affordable housing in those developments. So if you're taking state money, you're committed to providing a certain number of units of affordable housing in that development. I think we also have to look at the formula in terms of how people calculate what is affordable housing. You know, if you're building a building of 100 units and you're gonna charge $2,500 a month, you know, we shouldn't be calculating affordability based on that $2,500 a month. It should be about what the medium income is in the area. What's affordable to the working people in the area? Can they afford to rent in your building? So that's kind of what we're looking, what I think is important. I also think education is important. We need to make sure that tenants know what their rights are, know how, so that they can know how to access the Fair Rent Commission if they have it, know what landlords are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, know what their rights are during an eviction process. I think education is really important to this piece as well. And also, we need to work with our cities and towns to make sure that when they cut deals for tax abatements to out-of-town developers, that the city is not, or the residents of the city are not left holding the bag with increased taxes and higher rents across the board. Because when you build high-end condominiums and apartments downtown, that increases the rents for everybody else around town. And so that's a big problem, and we need to make sure that cities are not incentivized to do that at the expense of renters.
I think Dave said it best, and I think about 10 years ago, Dave and I sat down and we helped establish the city's Fair Rent Commission, not realizing how important it was going to be almost a decade later. I do think that our House Priority Bill is extremely important, but to Dave's point, it really does come down to our municipal leaders and the impact and the sort of quality of conversation that they do have with developers. And saying staunchly that we support affordable housing will create buzz to those developers. Maybe they'll be upset, maybe they're willing to come to the table. But if it's not being said, and if that is not the direction, then it's gonna be really hard to address the concerns that we were talking about, especially what Dave said. So I think it's incumbent upon not just this delegation and folks at the Capitol, but certainly working in collaboration with our city councils and more specifically, whoever is at the head of the table as mayor.
Thank you, and I agree. I agree with everything everyone's talking about. But you know what I'm finding? So at my shelter right now, I have 10 senior citizens. We're not developing enough units for our seniors. There's a big issue here in the state of Connecticut. And so when you have a senior who has a fixed income of $1,100 a month, they can't afford a $1,200 rent. So I've had seniors in the shelter now for close to a year because we can't find housing. Now, mind you, the shelter that I'm at is a 90-day emergency shelter. In 90 days, we're supposed to find them a place to live and move on. 60% of the people at that shelter right now have been there close to a year. Can't find, and I don't think these stories are shared enough, and they will be shared in Housing Committee. That's why I went on Housing Committee as well, because I see that issue. And you know, how bad is it that we live in a country where we don't take care of our seniors? They worked all their lives, and this is how we treat them at the end of the day? Oh, we can't find housing for you, so go into a shelter? Shame on us. So that's something that I'm really going to be focusing on. Is how do we help these seniors? Because we cannot find housing for them. And they want to be out of the shelter. They don't want to be in that shelter. You know, they want to have their own place, some dignity. It's like, it's sad. I can tell you, and I invite people to visit the shelters. The shelter here too, in New Britain, has several seniors that are living there too. So it's a statewide issue. And we really need to focus on housing this year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rick, you want to have the last word on this one?
Last word, all the words.
Yeah.
As many of you may know, I mean, housing is my specialty, most of my personal life, and I was the chair of the Housing Committee for a couple of years. And 4 years ago, myself and a couple others were screaming that we were at the beginning of a housing crisis, and we needed to act. And unfortunately, the reality of the world is you only have a housing crisis when you don't have housing. People who have housing don't see it as a crisis. it's, the crisis is created by a function of capitalism and the economy that we live in. I mean, inflation hit, prices shot through the roof, house values shot through the roof. As they sell for higher values, the new landlords have to charge a higher rent to meet the higher value of what they paid for the property. But it was dramatic. I mean, in New Britain, I can tell you, your average two-bedroom apartment 6-7 years ago, $800 a month, is now $1,200, $1,400, and even $1,600 a month. And this puts an unbelievable amount of strain on younger families, but they can manage it. Some not manage it, but they survive. They scrimp, they save, they do work extra hours, whatever, and they pay that $1,400 a month. But what Representative Sanchez, Bobby here is talking about is the next level of this crisis, because we haven't hit the top of the crisis yet, is our seniors on fixed income who can't work more, can't go back into the workforce, and they get a certain amount of money a month. And the bottom line, if that certain amount of money you get a month is not enough to handle the $400 increase in your rent, you are going to become homeless. There's no other option there. And what exactly are we going to do about that? And the market rate housing and luxury housing and the stuff the developers are making, not to belittle them or speak badly about them, but they're in the business of making money, the capitalist system that we're in. So they're going to develop housing that makes them the most amount of money, which is not below market housing. So I was a little disappointed, and we've had discussions, Representative Sanchez and I had a couple discussions with developers that have been very active here in New Britain. And we said, listen, we like the fact that you're investing in New Britain, you're building things, you're doing things, but we want to see balance, unlike the previous administration. We want to see balance. We want to see you also build, especially if you want assistance from the government in terms of tax breaks, we want to see you build below market housing to help the rest of the city as well while you build your nicer luxury housing. As you may or may not know, the downtown housing that's being built is $2,500 for an efficiency. For an efficiency, 500 square feet. What's the two-bedroom going for? The efficiency is $1,700. The two-bedroom is $2,700. So, I mean, that's more than a house costs in New Britain. But that is a function of what they can get. So it's working with the developer saying, listen, we don't want to not help you. We don't want to not have you work and do developments in New Britain. We just want a balanced approach that address all the people, especially the working class people that come from New Britain who need rents and housing at a level they can afford. So that is where we are. We are still in the middle of this housing crisis for people who cannot afford the increase in the inflation of what's been happening in the housing market. We did have some successes. There is the tenants, people are not aware of what's called the fair rent commissions. That was expanded to some communities when I was housing chair, but certain small towns still, it isn't mandated that they have them. We need to expand that further. And education needs to go out there to let tenants know that that is available, that if your rent is increased dramatically, if your landlord increases your rent by $500 without being able to say, like, they did improvements or they did something to the apartment, you can go to the Fair Rent Commission and say that's an unjustified increase and you can get help for that. We also passed a bill called Right to Counsel, which if you cannot afford an attorney while you're being evicted, the state will pay for your attorney so you have legal representation while you're getting evicted. That has been an incredibly successful program. That's been, I think about 3 or 4 years that's been in existence too. So I could go on and drone on forever about housing. It's something very personal to me, but it is, bear in mind, these prices have gone up, they're not going to come down. So this is the new reality of what things are going to cost, and people are going to struggle with their housing costs for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Hmm,
Can I just add one point?
Okay, one last
Yes,
one, and then I
quickly,
think,
sorry.
as Rick said, we could go on forever.
Yeah,
on housing.
and I think when people ask why the housing is an important issue, is because it affects other parts of people's lives, right? If you're a parent and you are struggling to pay rent and you don't have a place that you know you can go home to, that affects how you interact with your children. It affects your mental health. It affects your ability to do all kinds of other parts of your lives. For kids, the instability of not knowing where they're going to live affects how much they go to school, when they get to school, how they perform in school. So it's just not an issue of where people live and their housing. It affects every other part of their life. So this is something that is just a huge issue, and obviously we're going to have to try to get a handle on it.
Bill, I see your hand, but you've had two questions already. Let me get to you. You're right back there, and I'll try to get back to you. Second, Mary on the back.
Yeah, I just had, just wondering where you're at. So, like with the Fair Rent Commission, I hear you on that, but then I also hear that without, you know, if your landlord finds out that you went there or complained, then they can just evict you. So, like, what's the point? And then I wanted to ask, since you mentioned the downtown housing and how that's affecting, because I'm in a rental, and was bought by a New York real estate company, and they're raising rent, so now I'm wondering, okay, if that new place downtown is $1,700 for an efficiency, I'm paying $1,300 for a small efficiency, and does that mean now they're gonna try and raise it to $1,700 to match this downtown housing? It's like we're trapped in this cycle. And I hear you all on the housing, but like, what's happening now?
The simple and sober answer to that is yes. Your landlord can increase your rent, and they are going to increase your rent. And you will have to pay a higher rent. That is a function of living in a rental economy. And you can go to the Fair Rent Commission and say, listen, that rent was unjustified, and you can fight them on that. And they should not. No, evicting someone is very difficult. So, Bill, evicting someone is very difficult. If they try to evict you because you went to a Fair Rent Commission, well, that puts actually power in your hand, because then you can go after them for retaliatory eviction, which really legally will put them in a bind. They don't want that. An eviction costs a landlord anywhere over $10,000 nowadays to get to actually evict someone. They don't want to go through that process. So your best bet is to always work out with your landlord. You can go to a Fair Rent Commission if you think the increase is justified. But mind you, if you have a new owner of your complex and they want to raise your rent, they have the right to raise your rent. It's their complex. And when your lease is up, they can say, hey, your rent is now this much. Pay or find another place to live. I mean, there's no guarantee that your rents will stay low. So that is a reality of the world. But understand, eviction is very difficult. Don't think landlords can just evict or even want to just evict. Most, by far, 99% of landlords don't want to evict anyone. It's very expensive, it's very cumbersome, and it takes a very long time. And so you can work with your landlord to try to make a happy medium, but they do have the right to increase your rent.
Okay, would you pass the mic down to Rebecca, who had her hand up for me? And then maybe, as much as housing is enormous, let's do a subject change.
Sure, so I just wanted to be clear, and you know, different districts are having different issues, but from what I am hearing from my constituents, it isn't exactly eviction, it's lease renewal. It's, you know, people that have went to fair rents now, all of a sudden their leases aren't getting renewed, and big rent increases are happening there. There is a bill right now in place that would, like New Britain fair rent, that may be working wonderfully. But in some towns, they're really struggling with it. Some towns have maybe more landlords on it than tenants, or it's not working out so well. So I know there is a bill that's being looked at right now that would regionalize fair rent. Commissions, I believe it looks to have COGS, is that correct? You know, Gary?
Yes,
COGS,
that's what we're doing.
that who would have COGS to make it regionalized, and to also give towns that don't meet the threshold the ability to have access to a fair rent commission. So I know those are some of the things that are being looked at right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's change our subject a little bit. Marie?
I have a couple of questions on transportation, public transportation. The governor has proposed raising fares on buses and trains across the state. Will this be matched with improvements in service? Also, more routes and more frequent trains? Locally, there's a proposal for a train station in Newington. What do you think about that?
I'd love to, I have the mic, I'd love to start again.
Okay, you're on, Gary.
First, in regarding the governor's proposal with the bus fares and the train fares, I think some of us were surprised to see that. The people that use public transportation, a lot of times, are working people that are struggling with cost of so many other things like housing, and can't afford that particular increase. So I think with a lot of my colleagues, myself, when we saw that, we didn't like that proposal in the governor's budget. And we'll try to eliminate or reduce those increases. Now we understand, you know, the funds to be able to operate those systems have to come from somewhere. So if we're, you know, not going to raise those rates, we have to find that funding somewhere so that we can make sure we're maintaining the current routes. But also we want to expand public transportation, don't we? I want to make it easier for people to, you know, get to places and not rely on cars, which are expensive, as well as not good for the environment and pollution and things like that. I've been a huge supporter as a Newington resident and also representing Newington for the Newington train stop, which would greatly benefit the city of New Britain and the surrounding area as well. I know some people can just go down to Berlin or go up to Hartford, but having it right next to CCSU would be really convenient for those 12,000 students and faculty as well there. And the great part is the train already goes through the town, right on the Newington-New Britain border. Why not have it stop so we can get on? So I propose legislation to build that, and I'll be pushing for it. So.
Thank you. I'll just add, as Bobby said, the governor's budget is the proposed budget. It'll come before the legislature, and I think those are some of the questions that we're going to ask in terms of the fee increases. You know, is this going to improve service? Is this going to make you know, public transportation more available to folks? And so we'll have some serious discussions about that. And you know, and if we don't get the answers that we want, you know, we'll push back on those fee increases.
I agree with all of that.
I'm just gonna say the sleepless nights and the hard work begins to work with that budget. Because there's, like I said, I looked at a portion of that budget and already I disagree with a number of things in there. So it's gonna be up to us to counter some of those arguments on that side and hopefully come to a compromise.
Rick, got a comment from you on this? Okay, thank you. Ken?
There's a proposal, the Husky insurance program has been a lifeline for many, many residents in Connecticut. And there's a proposal before the legislature that would extend that benefit without regard for immigration status. I know Bobby has already indicated his support for that at a previous session I attended. I'd like to know what the rest of you think about it.
I'll think of that.
I agree with it.
I am in total support of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree, but as we were talking before, Medicaid is already drastically underfunded. So you're going to add more people to who are eligible for Medicaid, more demand on the current providers we have, where people sometimes wait 3 months when they're in severe pain to see a dentist because they can't find a Medicaid provider. It's going to make the system worse. So to do that, we have to put a drastic increase in provider, reimbursement and expand the actual network, or it's going to cause more problems for the million current individuals we have enrolled in Medicaid in the state.
I definitely am in agreement with that. I will say I do get pushback in my district, saying that we're handing things out and we need to take care of America first. So I believe healthcare is a human right, but also I tell everybody that kids are not getting things like immunizations. Kids are in public classrooms. So how is that affecting your child? So if you don't believe that everybody should have access to healthcare, how do you feel about the healthcare of your child?
Okay, thank you for, okay, Bill, go ahead.
I'm gonna make you mad at me, I gotta go back to housing.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
I have a letter in here that was sent to a Mount Pleasant resident a couple months ago. This country used to have housing built by the government, managed by the government for millions of people. We don't do that anymore. We're scrounging around trying to find, like Rick said, somebody who can make a profit off of this. And it ain't working. And Mount Pleasant, some of the few government housing that we have left, if you look at this letter, they're getting ready to privatize it. That's what their goal
Bill,
is.
is there a
Bring in-
question?
Yeah. I want you guys to weigh in on the question of government public housing.
Okay, Rebecca, you've got the mic, lucky you.
I agree. And, you know, I definitely support that. We absolutely need more affordable housing.
One of the proposals in that bill that I was talking about earlier is to potentially invest $200 million in the, next couple of years for building more affordable housing through our public housing, through housing authorities, giving the money directly to them to build, to be operated by government, that have boards of directors that are appointed by people living in municipalities to oversee it and have, a consistent, and then the property's deeded forever as affordable versus we give tax credits to a private developer to build affordable housing, and it's only deeded to be affordable for a certain amount of years. That might be a long time, 20, 30 years, but eventually that expires, and how often do then they convert it to, again, $800 to $3,000 a month? So more investment in public housing, I agree with.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree with what my colleague said.
okay. Because we've spent so long on housing already,
Bill, you have our number.
Lisa, I just spotted your hand.
Thank you all for coming here. Different subject. Can you tell us the status about funding for our higher education system, particularly our community college?
Okay, who's going to lead off on that one?
So, what's that? Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress. The governor proposed some small assistance to higher ed, but I think we're going to be looking at it through the committee process in terms of what we can do to provide more assistance to higher ed and the community college system. I think what people don't understand is when the higher ed community or the education community comes and asks for greater assistance, and people look at the numbers that they're asking for, they don't always realize that these entities have been pretty much underfunded for the last 10 or 15 years. And so we're constantly playing a game of catch-up with where we're at in terms of funding for these programs. I'm a huge supporter of the community college system and our local public university system. I think it's the driver for the middle class in this state. So I'm going to be pushing our committee chairs to move forward with any bills or any programs that can assist with greater funding for those programs.
Thank you, Dave. So as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I've been in higher education for 14 years. I started relatively young. But I am sitting on the Higher Education Financial Sustainability Advisory Board, where we're discussing some of the functionalities of primarily our CSCU institutions, where there could be cost-saving measures, where there are needs. And then honestly, the biggest part that we've been discussing, I think collectively outside of that, is Roberta Willis. And for those that don't know, that's money on the front side to essentially provide students with support financially. We have been approached from our adjunct faculty on a number of issues, primarily about their status, and they're wanting to be on the state healthcare system. So there are different pockets and needs that are being addressed. I do know that the Financial Sustainability Advisory Board is taking all of that into consideration, and we'll be working kind of across the board for the next year to figure out a plan to move forward. And that includes Chancellor Chang, who is also on that.
We have interesting issues with our higher ed. I mean, you have UConn at first doing very well, expanding, high demand to get into the school. They are pushing more and more to become a higher echelon type of school. And despite the fact that they have a large influx of students, Because of the expansion, the growth, and what they want to be, they're demanding and asking for an awful lot of money to reach the next level. So it's a high financial drain there. Then we have the CSU system and the community colleges, which are the complete opposite. Their enrollment is dropping. It's not producing enough revenue. They've gone through, over the last 20 years, a lot of leadership changes, and there's no other way but to be blunt. The leadership has been lacking, and the administration of the system has been terrible. Many of you have probably read the papers. It's in the papers all the time. The current chancellor is under fire for a lot of his actions. He just got a vote of no confidence from the faculty. And frankly, a lot of us who have been watching and been on the higher ed committee over the last 5 years have not been impressed by his tenure and the direction of the CSU system. They continuously claim that they have no money due to dropping enrollment, and yet they keep putting money into their administrative side of the school system, which doesn't interact with students, while cutting funding for the teachers, the professors that interact with the students, and then saying, I don't understand why we're not getting any more students, and students are dropping on, getting lower enrollment rates. I can't express to be an expert on exactly how it's run, but frankly, it does not look good. The direction of our CSU system is not healthy at this point, and I think it needs to have some drastic changes this session. We're hopefully going to affect those.
Gary?
Probably not. Well, I have to save my voice. I had a voice surgery last summer because I overdid my voice the first 6 years.
What a shock.
One of the things I'm most proud of, my time in the legislature the last 6 years, was helping create our free community college program. So all high school graduates here in New Britain around the state can go to one of our community colleges and don't pay anything out of pocket, get that associate's degree, no student loan debt. So we have to continue our commitment to that program, continue to fund that indefinitely. I'd love to be able to expand it one day for bachelor's degrees as well, right? But as my colleague stated, UConn gets all kinds of additional revenue. It also has the ability to have a certain amount of students that come, international and don't need any financial aid. They can fully pay whatever it is. But our community colleges, our other state universities, these are all of our kids that are growing up here in our community that don't have the ability and need that additional financial aid. And what I don't want to see is any increases in tuition. Any more, ever. Decreasing and making it free eventually. Like Europe and Canada and most other countries figured out with higher ed and healthcare that our country's still way behind, right? I met with Dr. Toro a couple weeks ago. If anyone doesn't know Dr. Toro, the president from Central, and she's amazing to me. I really like working with her. She's done a really good job, I think, of operating that university. And right now, they're the only state school besides UConn that is growing in enrollment. They are able to balance their budgets currently. They've had to make some cuts to be able to do that. But if the state does not come up with an increased investment, her projections going, and I asked why, what are your increased costs? If you actually have steadier increased enrollment, she says, it's like everybody else. Our electricity costs are going up, heating costs are going up, insurance costs are going up, union contracts and stuff is going up. So unless they see a big influx of cost, they will have to either cut programs, lay off faculty and staff, or have to raise tuition. So we're going to have to work along with all the other priorities we have to be able to stop that from happening. We're okay maybe for this year for Central, but some of the other schools, they need the money now. So.
Okay, Rebecca.
So I will definitely say I'm not an expert in this subject area, but I have seen that the legislature has done great work in the past couple of years with also vocational training and the trades. And I would like to see that work continue as well as part of higher education and workforce training. We do have a number of students that may not be going on the 4-year path, but definitely want to go into the trades, and those are great professions with great pay, and we are definitely in need of those as well.
Yeah, Rick mentioned UConn, and I love UConn. I graduated from there in 1999, and I think it's fantastic that it's getting a higher profile. But they receive a tremendous amount of state funding, and I think it's important that they still maintain their role as a state university. And I don't want UConn to get to the point where they're taking a huge number of out-of-state students. I don't want it to get to a point where their admission standards are so high that it's discouraging for in-state students to want to go there. I think UConn is a great experience for students, and I think it should be accessible to a large number of the New Britain kids and kids from all over Connecticut. So that's my only worry with UConn with this higher profile, is that they're starting to limit the accessibility to Connecticut kids.
Okay, thank you. Adrian?
Hello, Adrian Benjamin, Still Street, New Britain, and I know most of you. Hi, Rebecca. As usual, I need to talk about the long-standing problem of the nonprofit agencies not getting properly reimbursed. And this is true for homeless shelters, for people with severe intellectual disabilities, for domestic violence victims, for children's mental health. The state has asked nonprofits to care for the most vulnerable. The state has eviscerated, not under your watch, but years ago, eviscerated the state agencies that used to take care of the most vulnerable. So year after year, there's lots of advocacy, which I've been doing for a long time. I'm pretty intimately involved with this since I have a daughter who is part of gets services from DDS through HARP. And year after year, there's just not enough, the rates are not high enough so that agencies are closing group homes. There's vacancies in group homes, but they can't bring the people on the waiting list into the group homes because they don't they don't have enough staff to do that. Why don't they have enough staff? Because the pay is too low. They can make more money at Costco. These are hard jobs. The direct support professionals who take care of mentally ill and intellectually disabled people, they're hard jobs. They can make more money than even Sears. I meant to say pennies. Sears is not
Turn it into a question.
So my question
I know where you're
is,
coming from.
my question is, I know you know where I'm coming from. My question is, what does it look like with the governor's budget so far in terms of the fiscal guardrails? Because the people that do the caring work for these folks that need this, they're the human guardrails. They keep people safe, they keep people well fed, they keep people improve their lives. They're very essential workers.
So I think some of the folks that have been there a little longer could probably speak a little better to it than me, but just to be honest, I don't think I think doing anything beyond what the governor proposed in terms of adjustments to the guardrails is going to be a big fight. And I think the things that he proposed are a good start, but it's nibbling around the edges. Look, the bottom line is, if you want people to go into a field, if you want people to stay in a field, you have to pay them a reasonable wage, and you have to give them the benefits they need to care for their family. That's true for people that work in group homes, that's true for special education teachers, that's true for para-educators. We can talk all we want about all these grants to incentivize this and grants to incentivize that. If you don't pay people what they're worth, they're gonna go find something else to do, and it's gonna hurt the people that rely on that care. So I think that's gonna be an ongoing fight with the governor to get additional resources for nonprofits and for a host of other programs as well.
Well, you can say I'm a king of nonprofit because I've worked in nonprofit all my life. And I can tell you how we've taken the dollar and stretched it and stretched it and stretched it. Well, you know that dollar now looks like it's got 1,000 Band-Aids on it because it's broken in so many places. We have to do something this year in regards to nonprofits. We have to. You mentioned about employees. I can tell you personally that I was the cook for 4 months at the shelter that I'm in, because I couldn't find a cook. I was the maintenance person Okay, so I was cleaning. So not only was I a director, I was cleaning rooms, bathrooms, I was cooking on a daily basis, because I cannot pay them what we should pay them. $17, $18 an hour, you know? And since I've been up at the state, I have been vigorously fighting for early childhood, you know that. And you know, early childhood teachers are the lowest paid teachers, and I was very excited the governor talked about more funding for early childhood. Very excited about that. But let's look at this budget and let's see if it's gonna be effective and if it's gonna actually help nonprofits. I mean, I know it's something that I talked to leadership about, that I'm really adamantly going to advocate for, like I've always have. But we need to do something. Let's, you know, talk the good talk, and let's make sure that we put the funding in there so that these nonprofits can continue doing the good work that they do.
Just to piggyback off of what essentially everybody said, we're at a boiling point. And I think this delegation, I know this delegation will fight tirelessly and around the clock to address those concerns. We will be meeting with the governor's team at a certain point to address a number of issues. And this is certainly one that is very primary to all of us.
Rick, do you have something first?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, it's the sad part of it, you know, we keep talking about this, and what Adrian brought up is, you know, the state employees used to do this function of taking care of people. And 20, 30 years ago, the state had a great idea of, let's not have the state employees do that, because state employees get paid a good wage. Let's have the nonprofit sector take care of, do all these functions of, you know, we call the safety net functions, taking care of the most vulnerable. Well, and the whole purpose behind that is we can pay the nonprofit people less money. So well, it's a savings. So that's what we did. We pushed all these social services onto the nonprofit sector, and we paid them less money, and less money, and less money. And we keep paying them less money to the point where we're gonna hit a, you know, we can't find employees to do the work, and the people that take the brunt of this will be the most vulnerable. The safety net will fall apart. It is falling apart. And you know, we're up here talking about how like we're supportive of like fixing that. But everyone's beating around the bush, and I'm the one that has to say it. That, I mean, to fix that is we need more money. And the current administration, the message of the last couple of years of this fiscal frugality, not spending money, the guardrails, and having a surplus is we're not spending money. And now we have money in the bank, and I hate to say it to you, you know this deep down in your heart. This is a very popular message. The governor is very popular, and he's very popular because he's not spending money. And we see what the pain of that not spending money is. It's on the most vulnerable. So we can say all day that we're supportive of spending more money, helping the nonprofit sector, but the next level of that is, are we willing to spend more, to raise more money? We're gonna say, raise more money is increase taxes. And you go out there in the community and tell everyone, you're gonna be the person saying, I'm willing to increase taxes so that we can have more money to shore up the safety net. That is a much harder conversation to have with the voting public than just to say like, oh yeah, I want better services. So it is a difficult message. Understand how popular the government and the current administration has been by not spending money. And to fix these problems, the solution is more money. At a certain level, we need to raise more revenue, and we need to spend more money to fix some of these problems. And that is the one thing that's going to be very difficult to convince our colleagues, not the ones here, but throughout the rest of the legislature, and to convince the voting population.
Thank you. Gary, you in search of a microphone.
Yes, thank you. So it's my understanding the governor's budget proposed a 3% increase for nonprofit providers. That's a decent starting point from what we've seen in past years, where there's been some governor proposals that were 0.
10%.
Yeah, in my 6 years, whenever, you know, the governor has made the proposal for what he's going to provide for nonprofit providers, we've always in the legislature, through the appropriations process, improved that. So we've gone from 0 to 2.5 or 0 to 3. If we're starting at 3, well, there's a chance maybe we'll be able to go to 4 or 5, but probably we're not going to want to do any worse than the governor. So there's some good news there, right? the governor having some flexibility on the volatility cap for fiscal guardrails, I mean, that was really good news to us, but it was just a 1-year change in that, not permanent. So that's something that the Appropriations Committee and the entire legislature is gonna have to look at and say, hey, we know this volatility cap needs to be fixed on an ongoing basis, not just for this year, and then we have to have the battle all over again next year that we have, $2 billion in surplus, but we can't spend it because of the guardrails. But the other proposal I really like that the nonprofit providers have been fighting for a number of years, is there a way there could be an automatic increase, cost of living, index to inflation, something that, triggers the increase in the percentage without having to go through this whole legislative process. Now, I know government, a lot of times, like right now this year, we have very little money we can spend under the constitutional spending cap because of all of the fixed costs that we have already. So when that all increases, it's like leaves us very little for the discretionary spending, for these other things we want to do, like increasing affordable housing or helping with health care. So I know the government doesn't like to handcuff itself where, because of fixed costs, we have no discretion and we have no say in what the budget is. But I do think this is such an important issue for nonprofits to be able to plan, to be able to budget, to be able to know what they're going to be able to pay their employees the next year. This is important enough to develop something where it doesn't have to be this huge political battle that's probably so draining on all the families like you, Adrian, that are affected by this. Every year having to come up to the Capitol and pretty much beg for some sort of increase so your daughter can get the services she needs. I think we can do better as a state and like to try to fight for that.
Sure. So one thing that's become very apparent is I haven't been to any forum where I feel like people are asking for extras. We're talking about homelessness, food insecurity, and healthcare. So I think this is a fight definitely worth having. I think the governor's budget was a start and only a start, but it is a fight worth having. And to Rick's point, yes, we do have to increase revenue. And in my opinion, maybe, I'm sure it's in the minority and a lot of the legislature, but the truth is, Fairfield County, many people looking at the top percentage income earners are paying 9%, while we're paying 25 to 30% in taxes. So it's something that really needs to be looked at. And I just want to point out, for almost every single issue that's been brought up today, education has came up. We need more education on it. We need more things on it. So, I mean, what we can use from the community is to show up, testify, share things on your social media platform. Some things I'll share, they'll go, oh, she's a Democrat, I'm not listening to her. It's an immediate political divide. But these issues that are important to you, just please show up. I need you guys to be louder than Greenwich.
Thank you. Yes.
There was a public hearing yesterday about SJ 35, or a resolution proposing a state constitutional amendment concerning discrimination on the basis of sex under the Equal Protection Clause. If you could speak about your level of support for it and any reservations you might have about its ability to pass. I mean, I know it's not there, I know it's not being voted on or anything yet, but.
I don't even know if the public hearing is completed. I think they had almost 300 people speaking on it last night. I know the overflow room was full at like 9 o'clock when I left the Capitol.
Wow.
But yes, no, I do support it.
Yeah, I'm definitely supporting a constitutional amendment to protect reproductive rights. Although I'll tell you, I'm getting a lot of emails from constituents of people who don't want me to support that. They're not supportive of reproductive rights. So this will be a battle to see where this goes.
Yeah, I agree with Gary and Rebecca. I mean, I would be supportive of that.
I am supportive.
I would be supportive, but I'm guessing that this would be, if it's constitutional, it would have to be a vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I truly believe that the people of Connecticut should chime in and make that decision.
I concur, just not very familiar with that.
You mean a vote on the ballot?
It would have to be
Correct, they would have to be on the ballot.
institutional.
Yeah.
Voters, right?
Yes.
We have to ask the
Okay, I'm glad to grasp that because I was looking at it on my sheet as things we did not cover that seem to be big out there. John, please.
Thanks. I know of all of your efforts to secure support for our critical stormwater sewer problems in New Britain, and it's taken 1.5 years to move the city just a little bit to be less indifferent to the problem in a couple of critical neighborhoods. I did hear the governor mention a few lines about this. I haven't studied what he proposes. I know Representative DeFranzo has filed legislation about it. So I know we're, all of these needs need to be balanced, but do you think the governor or the leadership can be moved to provide more support for these kinds of projects that really, it's the #1 issue I've heard of in my district in New Britain, even beyond property taxes?
Thank you. I'll speak to a larger or global issue on this. The others will, I know, speak more directly to our written issues. But the word we're looking for is resiliency. The governor has a resiliency bill. I have a resiliency bill in the Environment Committee, and essentially it's a fancy word for saying preparing our communities for larger weather events and, that are related to the changing climate that we are going through. You know, our once every 1,000-year storm is now hitting every 20 years. So we have to kind of reframe what we're expecting with these heavy rainstorms, and not just really heavy rainstorms, but even like 3 times, how many times a year, Frank? You know,
10 times in the last
10 times a year.
10 times.
We'll get flooding where we didn't get flooding for maybe once every 10 years. So resiliency, and the legislation the governor and I are proposing really have to do with communities being able to create revenue to address areas that are problematic on how they're going to build in the future. It's nothing to fix what we have right now. So as you know, the legislation, we're asking for bonding to fix certain areas of New Britain that are suffering consistent flooding. Bonding is never a guarantee. We have elevated it to our #1 bonding priority, and these guys will talk about that later on a little bit more. In addition, we have found a FEMA grant that we're working with the city on applying. I think the deadline's March 3rd, and I have good hopes that that would be a good chunk of the amount of money we need to address at least that one neighborhood. So there's a lot of work to be done. None of it's guaranteed, but just to know that it is elevated to our #1 priority in terms of bonding, and we are trying to fix those issues in New Britain.
And again, it is a priority for us, particularly the Allen Street project. That's something that has come up to leadership. What was concerning to me is that the governor in his budget put a $500 million bonding cap, so he didn't want to go beyond $500 million to bond. But again, at the end of the day, it's the legislature that determines that. So
It is our #1 priority. I'll let Dave speak to the logistics.
Sure, so just for people's information who don't know, the city is known for probably about 30 years that the drainage system under Allen Street needs to be replaced, and it's about 100 years old. It's deteriorating over the years, and as a result of increased flow through larger rainstorms, that system is becoming overwhelmed. And as a result of that, when we get heavy rain, primarily in the spring, summer, fall at times, the residents of that area from Allen Street over to Stanley Street get significant flooding into their yards, into their basements, and it's a huge quality of life issue for the residents there, and it's a public health issue because not only are they getting rainwater into their basements, they're getting sewer backup into their basement, and so you can imagine how that must be every time it rains to have to pump out your basement of 6 or 8 or 12 inches of water. So it's something that the city's been aware of for a number of years because of the cost, and there's not a small number of people that are affected by this. There's probably 40 to 50 homes that are affected by this at a minimum, but because it's not 200 homes, the city's been reluctant to go forward with pursuing funding on their own. So the state delegation over the last year has made it their #1 priority to try to get funding to get this project done. From the city side, the city has put forward a plan. They said that they're shovel ready on April 1st to get started with the project. They're waiting on funding. They've committed $4 million out of the $13.5 million to get the project going. So we're working on trying to get the other $9.5 million. And so what we've done is kind of taken an all of the above approach. As Rick talked about, we are pushing the bonding entities to get this funded through the state bond package. That is a process, and it's not a particularly quick one. So what happens is the delegation will request this as part of our bond request. We've said it's our #1 priority. We've met with the chairman of the bonding subcommittee. He knows that we want this to be a priority. I believe he's committed to putting it on the bond agenda for this year, which is a good thing. But that's step 1 in the process. The projects that are approved by the bonding committee then have to go to the governor's office for approval, and he then has to approve it. So it's a step-by-step process. So that's one avenue of funding that we're pursuing. As Rick said, we found the FEMA grant that the city can apply for to try to pursue another avenue of funding for this project. And that's something that is also hopefully going to be put forward within the next couple months. I talked to Mark Moriarty, the Director of Public Works, about this on Monday. He said they would be moving forward with that proposal. And then I put in a bill that is kind of a more longer-term solution to these type of issues, which would allow, the state would have to set aside money for cities and towns to apply for infrastructure reinvestment projects in their local communities. So that way we wouldn't get situations like this where cities and towns put these projects off for decades and then end up paying a lot more than we would have paid 30 years ago to get this project completed. So that's more of a longer-term solution. But these are the kind of things that the delegation is working on. These are quality of life issues for people in the city. Getting this done would make a huge difference to a number of residents in that Allen Street area. So I hope that wasn't too long, but that's kind of where we're at with the situation.
Thank you. I would like to raise on behalf of the New Britain League of Women Voters and with the support of the State League, a bill which many of you are quite familiar with, which is our Charter Revision Protection Act, if you wanted to call it that. The New Britain Area League became concerned after our last charter revision that too many voters did not know what they had voted on for charter revision questions that were on the ballot. We had requests from voters literally saying there ought to be a law that they can't do that when we started talking to people about what is on the ballot and what do these generalized clumped questions mean. That came around to a meeting with our legislative delegation, which welcomed our thoughts. And for the past, this will be the 3rd year, 3 years, we have been working on perfecting a bill that will bring more information to the ballot when there is charter revision on the ballot. Now, at this point, I believe that Rick and Bobby and Manny and Gary are signed on to the bill.
All of us.
All of you are on the bill? Okay, good. I didn't see that latest version then. And we appreciate your work on it, and we hope we will get some public input onto the site as soon as there is a hearing date for it. And I guess that's part of why I'm raising it. If you'd like more information so you can join us in writing public testimony on this, talk to me, talk to John DeFranzo, he's on the committee, Ken Spire's been on the committee, John McNamara's been on the committee, as has been Mary O'Brien, our president, and Mariola. So we would appreciate support from all of you, and we hope that this will just bring clarity to the ballot when there is charter revision. There will be a half dozen areas defined as areas which you've got to ask questions about if you're going to change them, such as how long does the mayor stay in office, such as how many people do we put on the common council, things like that, which really shouldn't slide by in a do you support all the changes question. So I did want to thank you for your work on that and support, continuing support, and I'll be in touch with you, as you will know, on that.
Could you mention the bill number?
SB 1117. Yes. Other than that, this has been a really, really informative morning. When we have all of you here, it's such an informative day. It helps us know what's going on. It helps, I hope, for you to know what's on our minds, what's in the forefront. And let's just say that we covered just about every topic that we could have this morning. If you want to follow more things, cga.ct.gov. Go to that website, and I'm going to say it again in a minute, because it has information about every bill that is being presented at the Connecticut Legislature. You can find the committees that you're interested in, then you can find what bills they're considering, you can find the committee members' names and some emails for them, you can find calendars, you can find information on how to submit testimony, either going in person, or doing it on Zoom, or just writing it in on a PDF where it can get looked at. So CGA, as in Connecticut General Assembly, .ct, obviously Connecticut.gov, cga.ct.gov. They say you should say something 3 times and people will remember it. I think I did it. For everybody, there are still goodies on the back table. We don't want to have to take them home, and I should not be eating 6 donuts, so please help yourselves. To our legislators, we hope you have a few minutes to stick around and talk informally with everybody. Finally, thank you for your service. So thank you. And to our audience who cared enough to come out on a cold Saturday morning, thank you for participating. It's what we all need to do now.